Caracas, January 3rd, 2026, just after 2 a.m. At that hour, the Venezuelan capital usually settles into a restless quiet. Distant traffic, scattered lights in apartment towers, the low hum of a city that never fully sleeps. But on this night, something felt different. Not visible, not audible yet. Just a subtle tension. Because events had already been set in motion long before anyone on the ground realized it. Without warning, the silence breaks. Explosions ripple across Caracas. Sharp, controlled, and nearly simultaneous. These are not random attacks. They are targeted with precision. Military installations across the capital are hit at the same time. Command centers responsible for coordination. Air defense systems designed to protect Venezuelan airspace. Bases in and around the city. These are not symbolic targets meant to send a message. They are functional targets, chosen to disable the country's ability to respond. Inside these facilities, confusion spreads instantly. Communications begin to fail. Radar systems flicker. Orders become delayed or lost entirely. Venezuelan officials would later report casualties among military personnel, but exact numbers remain unclear. What matters more than the destruction itself is the effect. This first wave creates hesitation. And in military operations, hesitation is everything. Because it opens a window.
What unfolds that night did not begin that night. For months leading up to this moment, intelligence efforts had reportedly been building a detailed picture of President Nicolás Maduro's daily life. Analysts often refer to this as establishing a pattern of life. It means understanding everything: where he sleeps, how he moves, who surrounds him, how long he stays in one place. Some reports suggest that planners may have even constructed a replica of the presidential compound, allowing special operations forces to rehearse the mission repeatedly under controlled conditions. Every hallway mapped, every entry point practiced. By the time the operation begins, very little is left to improvisation.
While explosions continue on the ground, a second layer of the operation unfolds above the country. A large number of aircraft move into position. Stealth fighters, surveillance drones, and electronic warfare systems. Most of them remain invisible to the public. Their role is not to be seen. Their role is to control the environment. Instead of completely destroying Venezuela's air defenses, the strategy appears more subtle. They are disrupted, jammed, blinded. Radar coverage becomes unreliable. Communication between units becomes fragmented. In effect, the airspace becomes temporarily controlled without the need for a prolonged air battle.
Then, at the precise moment that confusion peaks, helicopters arrive. They fly low to avoid detection, fast enough to minimize exposure. By the time they reach the presidential compound, located within a heavily fortified military zone, the situation on the ground is already disoriented. Security personnel react, but not as a unified force. Some attempt to respond immediately. Others are still trying to understand what is happening. Within minutes, the compound is breached. Doors are forced open. Entry teams move quickly through corridors they have already memorized. Resistance occurs, but it is fragmented and brief. President Maduro attempts to move toward a more secure location within the compound. He does not reach it in time. He and his wife are detained, alive.
Although the operation is rapid, it is not without violence. Some members of the security detail are believed to have been killed during the engagement. However, there is no indication of a prolonged firefight. The defining characteristic of the raid is speed. It begins and ends before a coordinated defense can form. One aspect often discussed in analyses of Venezuelan security is the country's long-standing relationship with Cuba, particularly in intelligence and internal security coordination. However, in this scenario, there is no confirmed evidence that Cuban personnel were present during the raid or among the casualties. The connection exists historically, but its role in this specific event remains unverified. Once the target is secured, the operation enters its most time-sensitive phase: extraction. The longer forces remain on the ground, the greater the risk of a coordinated response. Maduro is moved quickly, from the compound to a waiting helicopter, then out of the capital. He is reportedly transferred to a U.S. naval vessel positioned offshore. At this point, the objective shifts from capture to removal.
What happens next is less clearly documented. It is confirmed that Maduro arrives in the United States within hours, but the exact route remains unknown. Military analysts often reconstruct the most logical sequence: transfer from helicopter to naval vessel, then from vessel to a fixed-wing aircraft, then onward to U.S. territory. Some observers have pointed to unusual activity in Puerto Rico around that time, leading to speculation that it may have served as a staging point. The reasoning is straightforward. Puerto Rico is secure, it is U.S. territory, and it is geographically close. Other locations, such as Guantanamo Bay, are considered less likely due to political sensitivities. Still, no official confirmation exists. By the time Venezuelan leadership fully understands the situation, the operation is already over. The entire sequence unfolds in less than 3 hours. The most critical actions take place in minutes. Several factors contribute to this. Communication systems disrupted early. Command structures fragmented. Decision-making delayed by uncertainty. Even international allies, such as Russia, China, and Cuba, would require time to verify events and determine a response. That time never becomes available. To understand how such a scenario becomes possible, it must be placed within a broader historical context. Tensions between the United States and Venezuela have been building for more than 2 decades. Beginning during the presidency of Hugo Chavez and intensifying under Nicolás Maduro, the United States imposed multiple rounds of economic sanctions. Diplomatic relations deteriorated significantly. U.S. officials accused the Venezuelan government of corruption and involvement in narcotics trafficking. Venezuelan leadership accused the U.S. of attempting regime change and waging economic warfare. This prolonged conflict creates an environment where escalation is no longer unthinkable.
During the period often associated with Donald Trump, U.S. foreign policy is frequently described by analysts as highly transactional. Rather than relying on gradual diplomacy, this approach emphasizes pressure, leverage, and decisive, high-impact actions. This strategy is often referred to as maximum pressure. Supporters argue that it forces faster results. Critics argue that it increases unpredictability. In the case of Venezuela, many analysts interpret actions through this broader strategic lens. The official justification for targeting Maduro has long been tied to legal accusations, including narcotics-related charges and standing indictments. But analysts often point to deeper structural motivations. Venezuela possesses the largest proven oil reserves in the world, making it a critical player in global energy markets. At the same time, its political alignment with countries such as Russia, China, and Cuba introduces additional geopolitical tension. From this perspective, the situation is shaped by overlapping factors: legal pressure, economic interests, strategic positioning, regional influence. No single explanation fully accounts for it. It is the combination that matters.
The closest historical parallel is the U.S. operation to capture Manuel Noriega in 1989. But the difference is significant. That operation involved a full-scale military invasion of Panama. This scenario, by contrast, is defined by precision: limited duration, specific target, minimal footprint. Less occupation, more speed. By sunrise, the operation is complete. A president has vanished from power. A nation remains, unchanged on the surface, but deeply affected beneath it. And the world is left trying to understand what happened. Some details are known, others remain uncertain.
Because in operations like this, what is visible is only part of the story.